post show or
yes.
post qualification debrief. Which I still can't believe it all happened. I remember. I'm thinking back to that time, and there was certainly a lot of trepidation about the prospect of playing Peru. And
so we've missed all the grey wiggle stuff, and now that Peru have like rodeo clowns doing the grey wiggle in Peru, and it's just become quite
amazing
the thing.
how in our corner of the universe that whole grey wiggle thing has passed us by. Yet over in Peru, it's very, very much still fresh in the memory.
Absolutely, and for another 4 years, I guess, for those guys, which is quite unfortunate.
Are you surprised by the extent to which Peruvian made a point of getting bulls to run over imitation Andrew Redmayne's?
Well, I'm sure there's
Redmayne pinatas.
A lot of hate and anger in missing.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's the greatest show on earth every 4 years. So. And it's unfortunate with Redmayne getting a start for the Socceroos, his first real start on Sunday just gone in New Zealand with New Zealand's all-white kit, that he wasn't the grey wiggle. He had to wear a blue outfit. So, unfortunately, hopefully he gets to wear the grey one next time.
That would probably make him the first cross-colour wiggle. We've seen new people fill the shirts from time to time, but
true.
No one's gone from like red to purple, No one's just become Jeff. I mean, there's only one Jeff, so... we can probably keep our wiggle discussion for our own separate Wiggles specific podcast. But look, it's not just a time to celebrate the return of this show, the return of you to the studio, but it has in the past week been a chance to celebrate as well the centenary of the Socceroos. And of course, we did mark that with those 2 games against New Zealand, from which Australia emerged victors on both occasions. A clean sweep, both home and away, a 1-0 win in the, it's not a first leg like that, but, a 1-0 win in the first game and then a 2-0 win over in New Zealand in the second. How did you see those couple of games that we played?
Well, it's so interesting in that, I think, and maybe somewhat disappointing and a little bit pedestrian, that the Brisbane game, the home leg, was only in front of 25,000, and Arnie went with his tried and true sort of formula of players. And then the really, really good to watch as the observer, because you had 6 debutants come on, and he was basically playing the reserve or the backup team. There was only, I think, a couple of guys that started that had more than 10 caps. And that was really good to watch. I really enjoyed the second game, because all of a sudden there's questions to be asked. He had 31 players in the squad. There's a few that weren't picked through injuries and whatever. It is getting down to actually reduce the numbers to 26 that will go to Qatar is quite, and he mentioned it's going to be a headache. It certainly will, with some of the questions, more questions to be asked after the second game, I guess.
And it will be something that we'll definitely talk about as we go through this review. Now, let's start. It's a little bit dated now because it did happen a while ago. But let's start with that first game, the 1-0 with the first choice 11, the farewell game, I guess. Over in Queensland. I wasn't able to watch this one live, but you did. The first choice 11. Getting a 1-0 win on the night. Awa Mobile with not his first Socceroos goal, but his first on Australian soil, which was quite a nice moment. Was it a composed, solid victory? How did you sort of see the game?
Not really, Lachie. Like it's the game was fairly, like I said the word pedestrian before, it was fairly sort of slow going in terms of how they were working out. And I think the more questions will be, in regards to the lineup that they went with, would be, the central defenders and the main striker and how that's going to look coming in. Because I think our goalkeeper's settled, our right and left back are pretty settled, the midfield is settled, the 2 wingers are settled. It's just a couple of questions still be asked. And, Sainsbury and Deganek have been there for a long time. They both started on Thursday nights and were solid enough, I guess. Taggart up front and then replaced by J-Mac later in the game. But I think the rest of the team is pretty standard. And knowing how conservative Graham Arnold tends to be, is pretty much sort of left left the team there. I guess the bench positions are what we'll be looking at towards the trip.
Well, what of Taggart in particular? Because I know that he's been a player that a lot of people have been clamouring to sort of see as the as the starting striker for this side on a permanent basis, but maybe not his best game reintegrating into the team.
Yeah, but he wasn't alone in regards to that. Like they were all pretty flat. You know, Mobile has hit a pretty good strike to score, but they all seem fairly flat, which you'd expect from them coming, you know, across at short notice to line up for this friendly. And you remember it is a friendly, so, you know, trying to celebrate 100 years of the Socceroos through these 2 games against New Zealand. Look, yeah, it was there. It was a win. It was a win at home. Hopefully, you know, get ready to send them off and farewell them off Australian soil. And then the Sunday game was the one which has, I think, way more talking points.
Yeah.
In regards to who's going to be on the plane and how it's actually going to work together.
Absolutely, and pretty much all of the players that we saw take the starting 11, take the field in that first game, all just vanished. I mean, they haven't disappeared. We're not searching for them.
Correct.
Graham Arnold allowed them to leave, and that gave rise to a completely new look side. A lot of players with under 5 caps featuring in the starting lineup for the second game in New Zealand. And then, as you mentioned before, 6 debutants coming on in that second half. And certainly this is the time where that headache did start to arise, because we saw particularly from the players who came off the bench, a lot of players maybe put their hand up and say, maybe give me a thought or two when it comes to picking that 26-man squad. I mean, I thought from the starting 11 in this game, which of course Australia won 2-0. You talked about how the fullback slots are kind of bolted on, but I thought Nathaniel Atkinson had. Even though he's had a pretty difficult club season so far with Hearts, he's had a bit of a torrid start to the year, to be honest with you. But in this game, I thought he was very good.
He was very good. I don't think he's Arnie's favourite to start, but he was very good. I'm glad he wasn't injured too, because the turf was pretty much very slippery. We noticed that they played a couple of rugby union games on it the day before at Eden Park, and it was very noticeable. And at one stage, Atkinson went down clutching his knee in that first half, and luckily he's okay. But a lot of the players were slipping over all over the shop. So in terms of the surface was a little bit questionable, I guess, for such a big name. But yeah, Atkinson was great. And the other thing there, a starting debutant was Harrison Delbridge, who of course played college soccer, and then back to Melbourne City, and now doing great things in Korea. I think he was solid enough, but he won't get on the plane, given that we have the likes of Kai Rolls and Harry Sutar, who are injured and weren't in that initial squad of 31. So he'd probably be better for the run, but won't feature in Qatar.
And to add to that, his central defensive partner in this game, Thomas Deng, and neither of them really put much of a foot wrong. Delbridge probably had a few moments. There was a sort of quite clumsily given away free kick for New Zealand on the edge of the box. But, you know, Deng also, I thought, in his return to the Socceroos fold, acquitted himself very well.
Extremely well. Deng is probably, I reckon, his performance on Sunday puts him on the plane. You've got to remember, too, with the Olyroos, last year he was the skipper, and he's had some bad runs in terms of injury with his time in Japan. That I thought his performance was fantastic. He's probably going to get a spot going to Qatar in that respect. Someone that could actually fill that role, because I mean, he goes back to Sainsbury quite often, and Sutar is probably his preferred back two, but they're not going to be there when you've got Rolls and Deng are looking pretty good. So yeah, Tommy Deng was great.
Yeah, and he's also, I guess, got that versatility as someone who can also perform at right back. I mean, that's not necessarily well, I wouldn't say it's not a problem area for the Socceroos, but it's definitely a place where we've got some feasible options. But to have anyone who's a dual position player,
well, that's it. That gets him on the plane in case of injury.
Yeah, is always going to win you a bonus point. Now, the first half of this game was a bit of a struggle. I thought. I thought the substitutions in the second half really changed the dynamic of this game, and Australia decided to play and press a bit higher up the pitch, which I think really worked. But one of the players who sort of, I think, communicated that point or was an example of that point very well was Marco Tillio. Now, his first half was not particularly good when the Socceroos were sitting a bit deeper. He sort of found it quite hard to get into positions where he could sort of make his influence on the game. And then, of course, right before the halftime whistle, he had that sort of horrendous miss, but did lift in the second half before he, I think, eventually came off. Did he sort of potentially hurt his stocks? I reckon with that game.
Yeah, spot on. What I don't quite get with the national team, if you've got someone that's not starting at club level, which Marco Tillio doesn't regularly start for Melbourne City, he's that impact player off the bench getting 30 minutes, 25 minutes, similar to what Arzani was last campaign, right? He's the guy that comes off and makes an impact. So you're expecting him to start. So he's coming on and he's not running around with that energy and that fitness, that sort of fly in the bottle type I guess chasing balls down and running around like he does when he's an impact player. So you're asking him to play a different role. Missing that sitter didn't really help him. And then one of the debutants who is known as an impact player off the bench came off the bench and basically set up the second goal. I'm talking about Cole. We'll get to him later. But maybe Garang made the difference in terms of showing what you can do off the bench. I think Marco probably would have been better if he was played off the bench.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. Well, before Garang and the rest of the crew did come on and excite and create the bulk of the headlines, of course, Australia did find the opening goal as they had that sort of really vastly improved start to the second half. I think it was the opening 8 minutes, and it's quite a nice goal in the end. Mitch Duke
and Metcalf's cross, yeah. I think that Metcalf and Duke have both put themselves on the plane, I think, with that performance, even though it's a basic performance. But
does Metcalf do enough to crack a start?
No, I don't think he starts. If we look at the midfield that started on Thursday, which is Rustic, Moy and Irvine, I think that has to be the top sort of three midfielders that we'll be going with leading into the World Cup. Metcalf probably would. With Duke scoring, perfect cross was pretty much put it up for him to nod in, but that's similar. That's kind of Arnie's tactics when all else is failing, is those long balls to a tall fella to nod in. And Duke did it. And did it perfectly, like it was just set up for him. But that's what Arnie actually likes, and he goes to when we're chasing the game. So that will keep Duke in the team. Might even get him a starting berth, to be honest, in Arnie's team for the first game. I would prefer him as sort of to come on and chase the game if necessary. But I think that really puts him in the frame to start. Not my preferred, but just in Arnie's preferred.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, he's clearly. Graham Arnold, I don't think, has made any secret of the fact that he places a high priority on those who he knows he can work with.
Yeah,
and I think Mitch Duke has sort of been his number one crisis actor. Of course, we saw him involved in the Olyroos, sort of filling that striker void there as well. So yeah, I think it's a good point that especially because. Yes, Adam Taggart made the first choice 11 in the opening game, but necessarily, as you pointed out, he wasn't alone in this, but didn't have his best game. Perhaps that opens the door to a greater extent for Mitch Duke. But then, if we're, I guess what gives me pause for thought as we start to talk about some of the players who did come on and have an impact, obviously. Garang, Jason Cummings, Cam Devlin, Ryan Strain as well, who also came off the bench. If you're a player who is in danger of not making contention or not being in squad contention and you started this game, then can we have too much hope for the ones that only got a 30-minute cameo across the two games? As good as they were, I don't know. Does it not give you pause for thought?
Absolutely gives you pause for thought because and you will have quite a fond look, I guess, at the 6 debutants on Sunday's game.
Indeed.
4 of them have a Scottish connection. So I think for Australian football overall, you've got Strain, Devlin and Bacchus that have gone over to play in the Scottish Premier League, and that's given them the opportunity to make the national team, which actually opens up more spots within the Australian teams for younger Aussie talent. So that's probably a very good thing. I know Joey Lynch wrote an article on how Brexit's actually helped get the Aussies over into the Scottish Premier League, which is fantastic. But yeah, Devlin was fantastic. Bacchus and Strain really good. And Jason Cummings we can talk about Cap the Cum Dog and how we all went through it last season, but he's a very, very good footballer. He links up very well. He chases down. He does a lot of things off the ball that some of our other strikers don't. And him playing at club level with Qual, I reckon, in my personal opinion, would work better. They seem to gel really well.
I guess the sort of them playing together perhaps throughout the season as they both chase that Socceroos opportunity for the World Cup might work in their favour. They're sort of pushing to bring out the best in one another. The important caveat there is that we have seen some reports recently that Garang is potentially on his way to ink a deal with Newcastle as soon as the sort of next few days. By the time we next record, perhaps, this could all be a moot point. But I think they were certainly the two sort of most eye-catching contributions off the bench. I mean, there's a certain je ne sais quoi to both of them. They just had this kind of dynamism that you think that not only from a tactical perspective maybe the Socceroos could use a bit more of, but also just from a personality perspective. Playing well or getting results is one thing, but playing well is another thing you've got to factor in. But also having a team that actually has a point of connection, has people wanting to root for them.
Yep.
I think that in Garang and Jason Cummings in particular, they've almost got more sort of outward personality, stuff that can be used for media, stuff that can bring people in the tent of the Socceroos than the rest of the, 40, 50 players in contention combined. They've just, I don't know what it is, but they've got it.
They have personality, and for the dress, so not just the social media and the media and their interviews, which they're both fantastic at, because there's some innocence there from both of them and some honesty. But the dressing room would be up and about with those kinds of players in the team. I think what we might find is that the start of the men's A-League might potentially become a bit of a shootout between Jason Cummings and Jamie McLaren for that final striker spot, because this squad of 31 had 4. I don't think they'll take 4. They'll take 3. I think Taggart and Duke, I think Arnie's played his hand that he knows that they're going, and that I think J-Mac has scored goals for the Socceroos a lot, but probably against the lesser Asian nations. And Jason Cummings is would have scored without that handball and got the penalty to get off the mark on Sunday. I think that will be. I think there's 6 games leading until they get on the plane. That might end up just being a shootout between J-Mac and Jason Cummings.
Yeah, and I think that Cummings has given himself their best possible chance. He couldn't have done, I think, much more, and really neither could have Garang with the admittedly limited opportunity they got across the 2 games. They couldn't really have done much more with it. I mean, obviously the run from Garang to help set up the move that leads to the penalty is sort of the main focus. It's just not something that it's just not something that we see enough from this Socceroos side. And
let's be honest, we've got France, we've got Tunisia, and then we've got Denmark. You would expect at some stage in one, if not all of those matches, we're chasing the game, right? We will be at the 70-minute mark.
I would anticipate that,
right?
Yes.
70-minute mark, we're down by 1 or 2 goals, and we need to do something, right? In which case, you need to throw the X factors off the bench to see what they can do. And what is happening in the A-League, and we saw for the All-Stars against Barcelona that Qual is doing that, and linking up with Cummings can actually do that as well. You know what I mean? So I think a tiny cameo of what was it for them? 15 minutes, 20 minutes, not much.
It was about half an hour, I think. Maybe slightly less. It was Devlin who played roughly half an hour.
Yeah, that should get them, in my view, that gets Socceroos fans up and about more so than the campaign to qualify, which went to the playoffs and went to a penalty shootout. Like we got to remember we absolutely fell in. That gets everyone excited. I'm excited. I was watching Qual and Cummings, and that was the most exciting part of Sunday's game.
This was the most. That second half was, and I'm talking the performance as well as the individuals involved, was the most I've felt watching a Socceroos game. Like the most emotion. Yeah. And for me, that's very hard. That I felt watching the Socceroos for some time. I don't often get up off my seat or, sit up straight in my chair because of what I've seen. But that run, that dash down the right-hand side, the way he just swung a leg out to keep the ball in play as it was travelling and then just turned on the afterburners to charge down the right. It instantly just made you sit up and go, I need to be paying attention to sort of what's happening here. And I want more of that.
But I want more of it as well. Like that's been the most exciting part of watching the Socceroos in the last, this whole campaign and the rest of it. But the thing is, Arnie's so conservative, and even when we needed X factors and the rest of it, like the Japan game that took us to the playoffs, the one in Sydney, we went with Duke. We never we maybe chucked on Tillio in the last 15 minutes, who looked fantastic. But it doesn't happen. He's going to go with a tried and tested 11 that he's looked after him for the last 4 years. I think, unfortunately, and probably to the fans' detriment and the players' detriment, Sunday's game where we had these 6 debutants and we had the likes of Deng and Atkinson and John Rowe and McGree and Metcalf and like they're just playing for a spot on the plane, and will probably be wearing the bib for most of the 3 World Cup games.
Yeah, well, the player that we haven't kind of feels a bit redundant in the context of what you've just said. But the player who did come off the bench that we haven't really spoken about other than Ryan Strain was Cam Devlin. Yep. And now I recognise that he is a long way down the pecking order, and rightly so in many respects, Jason Cummings and Garang Qual were the players that sort of had most people or occupied most of the discussion space after the full-time whistle went. But man, I thought Cam Devlin, and obviously I make no attempt to disguise the fact that I am a Hearts man, and
watch him closer than most.
I've probably watched as much of Cameron Devlin in the past since he's left, for greener pastures, I guess, if you can call Scotland that. Since he's left, as many other people would have, and he's had a great start to the season in Scotland. I rate him really, really highly, and I think he displayed a lot of the attributes as a defensive midfielder, albeit against a New Zealand side who I don't think acquitted themselves very well. They sort of struggled to break into the game, particularly after that injury to Chris Wood. But what he was able to do in those 30 minutes in terms of break up attacks, be that sort of midfield terrier in front of a back four, make the interceptions, stick a foot in. We saw more of that from him in 30 minutes than I think we've seen from anyone who's been tasked to play that screener role in front of a back four for the Socceroos for a handful of games.
Yeah, I agree. He was fantastic. You've got to remember there have been calls for him to be in the squad for a while with his form in Scotland last season, not the one just started. So he's got runs on the board in that respect in terms of performing in Europe. So that's fantastic that he's now capped and he can be part of it, and hopefully he's one that makes the team. I guess we mentioned injuries to like Rolls and Sutar, but there's not too many others in terms of midfielders that weren't in this squad of 31 outside of Tommy Rogic.
No, and I guess Craig Goodwin was one of the other players who sort of...
I think he's quite unlucky, Craig Goodwin. To be honest, he's not considered in that squad. That's probably said you're not in contention, and he was absolutely fantastic against Peru.
I mean, there might even be a few Victory fans who are listening to this thinking, hey, you're talking about the midfield's just about sorted.
Yep.
What about the Johnny Warren medalist? Where's his rightful place in this conversation, Jake Brimmer? But
yeah, so Brimmer hasn't been capped, and then you've got D'Agostino that has. There's not going to miss out on Iconomides, who would be a chance. So these guys aren't going to be considered if they weren't in that 31 that Arnie picked, and haven't played before. I don't think they'll be considered.
And this is why I'm trying to sort of temper my expectations when it comes to Devlin, because I do think he was really good in those 30 minutes. I do think his attributes, a lot of them are elements that, while it's maybe not the most sizable problem area or thing to address for the Socceroos, he brought a lot to that defensive midfield that we haven't seen a lot of in that position. And I think against opponents who are going to have a lot of the ball, I think someone with those attributes becomes more important as opposed to less important. But despite that, the fact that he has only been not even starting in this second game, but coming off the bench for a 30-minute cameo, probably tells you that his odds of starting, unless he has kicks his already pretty strong form in Scotland up to another level, unless he is able to do that his odds of starting any of the games at the World Cup are very, very long.
Who did he replace? Was he replaced Metcalf or John Rowe? I can't remember when he came on.
I can't recall either, actually.
So Metcalf and Denny John Rowe both started, and neither of them are getting big minutes in Europe at the moment. I think John Rowe hasn't played too much now that his French side's in the top division. He hasn't got too many minutes, and Metcalf hasn't in Germany, not as many as Irvine as well. So there is that opportunity for Devlin to job share with someone in the midfield. I think that's he's probably his best bet coming forward. How old is he? How old's Cammy?
I think he's 24.
24. Okay, so you should be looking at him almost coming into his prime.
But seriously, like, if you look at all the other midfield options, does anyone quite do that? Now, I'm not. He does have his drawbacks, and I think one of the criticisms of him is that he's maybe not the most progressive passer all the time. I do think it was pleasing to that end that we actually saw a few more incisive forward passes from him in this game. We have seen him make a few more kind of attacking runs, albeit in transition in games for Hearts. We saw him contribute to one of the goals that they scored in their second game of the Conference League against Riga. So he is working on that side of his game. But if we're just talking about like the raw defensive attributes in that position, is there another player who really does that, or for whom that is their bread and butter? Like, he replaced Denny Genre in the game, who has been played as a deeper lying midfielder. But I don't think that's Genre's best position. Metcalf has got those elements, but again, he's not an out and out screener. He is more of an 8. He likes to have that sort of languid ball carrying ability, progressing it into further areas, even though he's a big physical guy. And Irvine's sort of the same. He's got the defensive acumen, but he does like to make those third man runs into the penalty box. You kind of, with all of those players, and Moy as well, can do a job defensively, but he's also a distributor. With all of those players, you kind of want, maybe with the exception of Moy, you kind of want a foil. You kind of want someone who is the stay-at-home presence that allows the more creative, dynamic midfielder in that setup to be able to have the freedom to advance and get themselves involved in those deeper phases of play. Do any of those players, is that really their best position in the same way it is Devlin's? I don't think so. No.
And have we had one since Jedinak that's doing that kind of role? No. You know, that tough guy in front of the defenders?
I guess Moy can be that, but I don't think it's his best.
No, it's not his
ability.
best.
And the reason he's not sort of more attack-minded is more down to his like mobility.
Yeah, he's not quick.
Yeah,
he's not quick. But who out of Moy, Irvine and Hrustic is not starting? Hrustic and Irvine are going to start. Hrustic's our best player, I believe, anyway, and Irvine will start with him just because Arnie's used him all the way through. There's that third spot up for grabs, but
it's a tough one because Moy, I mean, he's a Socceroos team of the century player now. That's maybe a whole nother matter for discussion.
Absolutely.
He's a Socceroos team of the century player. I don't. This is the problem. Is that Moy is not going to. If I was going to get rid of any of the three, maybe he'd be the one who would make way. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Moy and Devlin as a pairing is necessarily one that works. I don't think there's enough. I think then you're putting too much burden for midfield creativity to come at the feet of Aiden Hrustic, sorry. And I don't think that's really a conducive way to sort of play.
Yeah,
so,
and the other thing to look at too when we get into Qatar, the heat of Qatar, right? They're not, because this World Cup is ridiculously being hosted there, that the players aren't in camp for that long, that the games are going to probably be a little bit slower. I know all the stadiums are air conditioned and the rest of it. It might actually suit Moy a little bit if the game's a little bit slower and he can still do his normal distribution best. But anyway, like I said, you agree. Sunday was fantastic. It was so encouraging for those that have called for a bit of injection, a bit of difference, a point of difference to the team. And I think we got that. We got more questions than answers, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, let's just hope that some of these kids and all the ones playing their trade in Scotland makes a difference, and we see them go to the World Cup.
And I think by that same token, it was nice to have some. It was a really refreshing, and I'm only really stumbling on this realization now as someone who has been fairly pessimistic about the Socceroos. It was a really nice change of pace on Sunday afternoon to be, as I often am, locked in discussions with people about what happened with the team. But none of it was like really, what am I trying to say here? None of it was really coming from a place of pain or concern or hurt. It was more like, you know, we need to be having these conversations and we are locked in vigorous debate because there's an element of hope to the debate that was being had, and I found that quite refreshing.
I think whoever the next Socceroos coach would needs to look at that Sunday game and get excited and get really excited, because the bulk of that squad were Ollie Roos, who knocked off Argentina, not the best Argentinian team, but in the Olympics did some good things, and have a really good eye to the future, because there are members of this squad that won't be around for the next campaign. There'll be a lot of members of this squad that won't be going around. You look at like Lachie and Sainsbury, this will be their third World Cup, and Matty Ryan as well, third World Cup campaigns. So you can't see them progressing to the next one. And then you've got the likes of Duke and Boyle and stuff, they're late 20s, early 30s. That'll change things up. So the next Socceroos coach, it's very, very exciting, because we have elements of X factor, elements of pace, elements of aggression, skill. It's there. Some of the building blocks are there. So hopefully, whatever happens in Qatar, we have got the next gen almost ready to wheel out.
And it coincides quite nicely with something else. Like throughout all of these different World Cup qualification cycles, and you know me, I'm someone who results, for me personally, when I watch football, it's not the be all. Like, yes, I like to win, but I do like to. My preference is to you know, not. I don't want to say win in a certain way, but the style of victory matters as much to me as victory itself. But when you're playing in a tight sort of situation like World Cup qualification, where there is only so many spots available, you know, setting up in a certain way, winning at all costs, which has, you know, playing hard, that kind of thing, which has, I think, characterized a lot of Socceroos performances and play for a long time now.
Yeah.
Is that as apparent when you have an expansion of the World Cup? And let's be honest, Australia are going from this point onwards to find it a lot easier to qualify. Now, does that just mean that we can keep doing the same thing we've always done, play in the same way because we're probably going to qualify regardless? Maybe. But it gives me Sunday and the idea that we might find it easier to qualify in future gives me hope that we can start thinking a bit less with these exciting players we've got at our disposal, thinking a bit less about how desperately we need to win and a bit more about how we want to go about it. I don't know. It gives us the chance to think a bit more about what do we want to say through our football about Australia to the world.
This is you singing from the Postecoglou hymn book, because he's like, why just qualify when you got to try and win it, right? Which is a great way to look at it. If you want to look historically, we have won 2 games in 5 World Cups that we've been to, right? We've only won 2 games, okay? So as great as it was in 06 to qualify to the round of 16, it was a win, a loss and a draw. The same thing happened again in South Africa. It was a win, a loss and a draw. Brazil was 3 losses. Russia was 1 draw, 2 losses. The best we can hope for, I think, coming into these 3 games is points, seriously, because they are not playing the type of football that are going to have us defeat the current World Cup champions, a very, very capable European team in Denmark and Tunisia, So again, with a 48-team World Cup, you need to develop some creativity, some point of difference in how we play.
Yeah, but it just
with a chance to get some points.
It gives you potentially that. I don't say freedom, because I don't want to say that.
No, they'll qualify. You agree? They will qualify.
They're going to be a lot better chance of doing it without as much of the sort of heart-wrenching troubles that we've been through.
Correct. But if it's a 48-team World Cup, the chances are rather than 3 group games, there's going to be 2 group games, right? So there's less of a chance to make an impact. So you need to go bang, bang straight away.
And I think the fact that we had players play in these games, or in the second game in particular, that had attributes that we haven't seen in the Socceroos for a while, in my view, gives you hope that's the path that we might stride down. Before we head to a little break, Jason, and start to talk a bit of Australia Cup, we did mention that Socceroos team of the century. Now, it's stirred up a lot of debate online. I personally don't have many strong viewpoints about it, mainly because it's an online vote, and naturally that is going to lead to the voting skewing towards people who are terminally online.
Yes.
But I'd be interested to get as someone who's very connected not just to the present of the game, but also has a maybe deeper understanding of the history than perhaps some others do. I'd be keen to get your take on the selections.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of focus on the recent history of the Socceroos, and that being because we've made the last 4 World Cups in a row. This will be 5. Also, our move qualifying in 2006 was such a momentous occasion after 32 years away from the game that Hiddink becomes elevated to the top, despite Ange winning a trophy.
I mean, Rale Rasic qualified for a 16-team World Cup with semi-professionals.
Correct. So you would have, correct. So you'd skew towards the recent history. And the other thing, in terms of games played, we hardly played until we moved to Asia. Remember? So we wouldn't have some of our better players come through. You look at the likes of Paul Ocon, Ned Zelic, Mark Bosnich that weren't in the team, and they were doing amazing things in Europe and England, but didn't play for Socceroos that much because we didn't play too many games, right? And then you've got the guys that were battling it out in the 60s and early 70s that should have made it through. So there's an interesting, what I was fan voted, but then they did add a few extras in there. So yeah, I don't give it too much kudos. It's very skewed towards the most recent history.
Is that you rattled off some there? Is there a name that you think more than any other is like the glaring omission? I mean, someone like a Ned Zelic, like we don't really have to get into why, but is probably never, even if he was the best ever Socceroo, which he wasn't, but he was a Socceroo who did do great things in Europe.
Yep.
Is never going to, I think, be on the winning side of a fan vote.
No, he's not. And the other thing too, if you're looking at it for playing for the Socceroos, then clearly, say Mark Viduka didn't have the greatest of goal scoring records with the Socceroos, given how brilliant he was at club level around here in Melbourne and also Glasgow and Leeds and Newcastle and Middlesbrough, Croatia. Like he's amazing at club level, but at the Socceroos, he didn't get so much help. Harry Kewell wasn't available so often for the Socceroos as well, and Aaron Moy. So the guys that have made it through to a top level of playing overseas got a pretty good run at it as well. So, Matty, it's a tough one. Like, there's some names that you can't, obviously they've played fantastically for the Socceroos that you wouldn't give up. They've looked after every World Cup captain, I believe, in that team, plus every World Cup coach outside of Pim Verbeek and BVM. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't give it too much kudos. It's just a nice fan-friendly exercise to get people involved and perhaps excited for who they can get out of this World Cup that would be into that team.
Fair enough. And it has certainly generated some discussion, and that certainly can't be a bad thing. We're going to head to a break, but on the other side, we're going to get into some discussion of what really has been the centerpiece Australian football talking point during your disappearance, your carbonite years or carbonite months, which is the Australia Cup. We've reached the final. It's an NPL versus A-League affair for the first ever time between Sydney United and Macarthur FC. We're going to break it down, look at their runs to the finals, look ahead to the game on the other side of the break.
Make a refreshing choice for your business. Choose DKP & Co Chartered Accountants for accounting and taxation advisory, business restructuring and profitability benchmarking. Go to dkpco.com.au.
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Make a refreshing choice for your business. Choose DKP & Co Chartered Accountants for accounting and taxation advisory, business restructuring and profitability benchmarking. Go to dkpco.com.au.
Victory looking to build. Barbarouses is quick. Is he in behind top or Stanley? It doesn't matter! Costa Barbarouses! Wow!
Like a salmon, a spawning salmon. And Diamanti again! Oh, he's done it!
Unbelievable kick from Maria.
Welcome back to the Oz Football Hour here on FNR Football Nation Radio. We've been talking all things Socceroos to mark the return of the program back to the airwaves. We've been reviewing the games against New Zealand, reviewing the controversial online voted team of the century, but now we're going to move away from the international stage and get to the extremely local stuff. And I speak of none other than the Australia Cup final coming up this Saturday at CommBank Stadium. And as we go to where the announcement has come through from the Football Australia socials that 10,000 tickets have already been sold a number of days out from the event. And I think it's fair to say I wouldn't say the excitement is building necessarily, but the hype that this cup has built throughout the stages of the tournament looks like it's going to culminate with quite a captivating final, I think, this Saturday, Jason, between Sydney United and Macarthur. It is
I'm not going to say hidden gem because it's obviously quite accessible now on free-to-air through 10 Play. But this tournament is amazing. I actually get up for it most years, and I went to as many NPL versus A-League games that I possibly could. And here in Melbourne, we were lucky. I got to see Heidelberg take on Brisbane Roar. I got to see Avondale take on Brisbane Roar, and the other one I went to was Bentley Greens and Sydney FC in terms of the David versus Goliath type games. And at this time of the season now, it's not that far removed, and we saw more NPL sides knock out A-League teams than we have ever before, and Sydney United have done two on the trot to get through.
Yeah, they have, hoping to make it three. They've of course already knocked off the Brisbane Roar in that thrilling game that they had in the semi-final at Adenza Park, and then before that. I say it like it's really, I've buried the lead here, really. They beat the reigning A-League champions 1-0 at Adenza Park as well. I mean, this has been... It's been the Australia Cup run for an NPL side, the fairy tale run to end all fairy tale runs, really.
And the thing about it too is that they haven't had the greatest of seasons in NPL New South Wales. I looked it up today. They finished 8th out of 12.
Yeah, they had a very. I do a bit of highlight editing for the New South Wales NPL for work, and. Yeah, they had an abysmal start to the season. They did really build towards the end. Maybe
sacked their coach too.
They sacked their coach. They hit that form at the right kind of time in the second half of the season as the cup comp becomes sort of more prevalent. But yeah, it's quite remarkable. They didn't make finals. They didn't look anywhere near making finals for pretty much most of the year, and yet here they are with a couple of ex-A-League names, some non-A-League names who have also caught the headlines and. Yeah, 90 minutes potentially and a goal away from, creating another chapter in history. They've made one, being the first NPL club to make the final, but they could be the first NPL club to win one against a Macarthur FC side who have probably had a slightly easier run. I think, any A-League team is going to naturally have an easier run to the final than an NPL club, but they've obviously beaten Mackay with Sunday, Montbury Jets, both second division sides in their respective competitions. The win over Wellington, of course, and then the sort of heartbreakers, the uncool, doing the uncool thing, I guess, for a lot of the neutrals and
beating up on
smacking Oakley on their home park,
beating up on a 13-year-old goalkeeper.
Yeah, but I mean, what did you weren't there for the Macarthur game?
No, I watched it all. So they went. Oakley went up 1-0 to start off with.
Yeah.
I thought it was Wade Decker, wasn't it? The first one? No, Joe.
No, it was Joe Guest.
Yeah, Joe Guest. Yeah, and I thought, here we go. The upset's on. We really want that all NPL final, which would have been good. And we talk about the whole sort of old soccer, new football kind of narrative that's been going on for 20 years now. I'm really excited that a club with a lot of history and tradition has made it through. So you got to remember that Sydney United were part of the National Soccer League. They actually won a cup back in 1987. Were the home and produced the likes of Mile Jedinak, Mark Bosnich, Robbie Slater, Graham Arnold, both played there as well. Tony Popovic, Ante Milicic, they all come out of Sydney United. So it's just a wonderful story for them. And we were talking off air as well that 10,000 tickets, I wonder how many of those tickets have been bought by Croatian clubs from other parts of the country. Yeah,
well, this is the thing, in case you missed it, in case you haven't seen people discussing it online, but just so happens that the tournament being played, or the final being played on the first Saturday of October, coincides rather with the Croatian soccer tournament, which is a congregation of all the sort of junior and senior Croatian clubs playing a big tournament. A lot of the teams from Victoria, Dandenong City, Melbourne Knights, and Auburn Saints, Dynamo,
North Geelong,
Gospich Bears, I could go on, will all travel up and play in this knockout competition. So there will be a festival at King Tom at Adenza Park over the weekend, and the timing couldn't be any better because they'll all be going in their droves to watch and support Sydney United against Macarthur. And look, we had a quick look at the ticket sales. Obviously, we've seen that 10,000 figure pop up, but we had a look at the Ticketek website, and there are two active bays at either end, 2 for Macarthur, 2 for Sydney United 58. The Sydney United bays are going.
So this Croatian tournament is the biggest that it has been ever because they haven't had it for the last 2 years, for obvious reasons. A long weekend in Sydney, and because of the amount of teams that are travelling to Sydney or coming or playing from within Sydney, it starts on Thursday night. And goes through, and it's a long weekend in other parts of the country, in New South Wales and Queensland on the Monday. So there'll be a lot of people travelling for that. That's quite an amazing setup. So, and they're up against an A-League team that has not much history, a wonderful playing list, and a marquee coach going for their first sort of trophy. But in terms of supporters, I think Macarthur are going to be well outnumbered when it comes to the fans on Saturday night.
Yeah, and look, I know that a lot of people were really clamouring for the idea of that all NPL final. I definitely, having been in attendance at Jack Edwards for the semi against Macarthur, I will make no no attempt to disguise the fact that I wanted them to win. Because I just love I just love an upset. I will always root for the underdog in any sporting competition where I don't have a pre-existing horse in the race. And I wanted Oakley to win on the night. They didn't. But the more I thought about it since then, I know everyone wanted the all NPL final.
Yep.
And they were really clamoring for that. But I put it to you, Jason, that this congregation, this selection of teams, which we would never have picked to make the final two, is almost the best possible.
How so? Why do you say that?
Well, I think obviously you'd like to have a victory or a Sydney or a Western Sydney or something involved. That goes without saying. But the amount of crossover between these two teams, it's as you said, a club who have won the NSL, have won cups, one of the most historic clubs in Australian football. They are as old soccer as you can get.
Yep.
Coming up against the newest of new football, pretty much in Macarthur, the most recent men's team to make their bout. They are so fresh. And, we're on the eve of potentially a national second division, hopefully after that, a merging of old soccer and new football and sort of bringing it all together. It feels like the perfect time for this to be happening. And it's one of the old clubs against the newest. And there's also a lot of crossover between these two sides. I mean,
geographically as well.
Geographically, yes, but I think the best example of it is, the chief of football, the chief football officer, I think, no, not chief football officer, that's Ernie Merrick.
Yeah.
The director of football, or football director, I think is his official title. Sam Krislovich, of course, is a massive figure. Was a massive figure at Sydney United. He was obviously involved in running the club. He's got 2 generations of family member, his father and his grandfather, who were key figures at Sydney United 58. His mum, Sam Krislovich's mum, won't talk to him for the next couple of weeks because she is a Sydney United 58 fan.
Yeah.
You've also got a number of players in the Macarthur 11 who have featured for Croatian clubs for Sydney United 58 before. Ivan Vujica, Tommy Uskok was a former Sydney United 58 player. And then on the other side, you've got Jacob Poscaliero, who plays for 58, but he, I think, has a role in the membership department or something like that for Macarthur. So there are so many little sort of elements, and it really speaks to the heart of what I love about the NPL. What I love about the Australia Cup is the amount of sort of weird bits of minutiae that you can get into. And I think that this particular matchup, while, yes, we'd love to have one of the biggest A-League clubs and have a massive final, but we still will get a massive final. But it's got so many of those tiny little tidbits that do make the NPL and do make the Cup great, that I think this is almost perfect. Like, if I was going to make a final in a lab, I might well have thrown these two sides together if I knew all the connections.
The romance is magnificent. And what you can say about Loewy's reign at the head of football in this country is that the Australia Cup, formerly FFA Cup, has been one of the absolute outstanding decisions that's really brought a lot of people together, and it's probably been the catalyst for the NSD when it drops. And it's been amazing. And even the game that you commentated in the round of 16, we had 3 NPL clubs take A-League clubs to penalty shootouts, which was just amazing. I mean, Sydney United go over Western United, but we almost had Adelaide City fell short of Adelaide United, and Avondale just missed out with Brisbane Roar. But, like, how amazing is that we go to 3 penalty shootouts in those final 8 games? And the romance of the whole magic of the Cup is there, and I'm hoping for an upset. The bookmakers certainly don't think that's going to happen. Sydney United, Sydney United 58.
No, it's okay. I'll let it fly.
Very, very, very long odds to get up in a 2-horse race, but I hope they bring the atmosphere. I hope their supporters bring the noise. I hope the Croatian Australian supporters from around the country turn up and back them in. And it would be wonderful if they got up. It'd also be great for Australian football if Macarthur got up, and that's not a very popular opinion, but you've got your new marquee coach, and you've also got an attacking playing list with the likes of Azani and Noon and Toure and Davila that are pretty amazing. So I'm really looking forward to Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got a commitment on Friday that I need to be here in Victoria for, but I'm honestly thinking about the day off flight up to.
You could drive up
Sydney.
on the Saturday. You could leave at 7. You make it.
God, I could.
If not, you'll be able to catch it on TV.
I'm really thinking about it. There's going to be some serious soul searching over the next couple of days just to decide, am I crazy enough to do this? I worry that I worry that I might be.
That's a good tournament.
I worry that I really do worry that I might be. I mean, as for the crowd, we're expecting it to be, regardless of how much it builds over that 10,000 figure at Combank with a lot of Croatian support. I think it is going to be a really great atmosphere. I think that's almost a certainty at this point. Do you think it'll make if there is a kind of raucous atmosphere, that it'll make a tangible difference? Is it going to unsettle Macarthur? I mean, they've been pretty, they've been pretty swashbuckling and commanding as they've gone through this cup run, albeit against some sort of lesser opponents to start the run.
I don't think that'll faze them. I'm sure they've been outnumbered most times in most away games, and we consider it an away game for them as well, given they're up against NPL opposition. I just had a quick look. So Combank Stadium's capacity is about 30,000. So with 10,000 already sold, plus you get a lot of walk-ups, plus you off the plane fresh on Saturday, looking for a big crowd.
No,
I reckon the atmosphere will be there.
I'm taking the Volkswagen, going all the way up. I don't know where I'll park, but I'll worry about those problems later. Maybe I'll sleep in the car. Who knows?
That's it. Shout out to Soccer Twitter. Someone will put you up. Find a couch. Yeah.
I'm sure I can pester someone enough to make that sort of thing happen. I mean, I know I've spoken of my appreciation for the upset, for the fairy tale, so I've kind of pinned my colours to the mast in terms of who I would like to see win in this game. Are you brave enough to make a prediction that might see you fall foul of the tragics of soccer Twitter?
No, I think it'll be Macarthur 4-1.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I thought you were saying that just to antaginise me.
No. I don't. I would love Sydney United to cause the upset. They are massive underdogs. They haven't played properly for since the semi. When was that? 6 weeks?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. The semi was 11th of September. So maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But their season proper finished six or 7 weeks ago.
But then by that same token, they have been solely focused on this. Like, this is their alpha and omega, this competition, and focusing on it and preparing for it.
I like to be romantic. Sometimes I'm a realist. I'm going to go 4-1. What about you?
I can't believe that I asked you, are you going to disappoint the soccer tragics? And then you answered, and I genuinely was flattened by your response. And it wasn't even a conscious thing. I wasn't playing a character.
No,
just subconsciously, there was a pit in my stomach.
I'm so sorry, Lachie.
No, it's okay. It's
I'll bring
okay.
flowers next week. We'll
it's great.
Romance of the cup.
Because now we can have contrasting opinions, and I'm going to say that the might of the Croatian soccer tournament turning up, converging on Combank Stadium, and unsettling Macarthur is going to lead Sydney United, because why not?
Yep.
To a 1-0 win after extra time. Right old cagey affair,
nice.
but that's where they may well excel. But regardless of what the final scoreline is, I'm just looking forward to what I think is going to be a great day.
Me too.
Absolutely. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for this edition of the Oz Football Hour, the return of the Oz Football Hour. I don't know about you, Jason. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself.
It's good to be back. And next week we can do a review of this final, see who's close to the score, and look forward to the start of the A-League men.
And hopefully everyone listening on at home has enjoyed the return as well. If you've got any questions, anything you want us to discuss on the next show, we are officially back 6 to 7 on Tuesday nights for the foreseeable future throughout the A-League season, throughout the Socceroos run, through the Cup as well. So make sure to either get in contact on Twitter with myself, Lachie Flannigan, or with Jason Goldsmith. You can always tag the station at FNR_radio. If you've missed any of the show tonight, you want to listen back to the Socceroos review or our Australia Cup preview. You can catch that on your preferred podcast platform or watch the live stream replays over on Twitch, Facebook and Twitter as well. But until next week, Jason, glad to see that the thawing process from carbonite hasn't affected your speech or your mobility or anything. You've been in tip-top shape. It's been great to have you back, and looking forward to talking to you again all over again next week.
Thanks, Lachie.
Victory looking to build. Barbarouses is quick. Is he in behind Top or Stanley? It doesn't matter. Costa